I wanted to get your sense of what this has been like for you, and maybe some of your the things that you're the most proud of, and perhaps the things that didn't go your way or you wanted to make more progress on.
You started out and you said, there's the optimism of running for office, and then of course the reality of what it is to be in office, and as the old expression is, the making of the sausage. And I think that there is, for a lot of people running for office for the first time, a lot of belief that I can get there and I can do a lot quickly. And I had the same hope and desire as well, of course, but I think because of some of the background that I did have, working in the Hogan administration in the legislative office, and also working for a year with Senator Rich Colburn, in both cases working for office holders in the minority party in state government, there was an understanding that things don't always go easily, and certainly it's a long path at times to get the consensus that's necessary to move forward with particular items. I think actually what I found is that here at this level, that difficulty has been less than what you would see being a Republican office holder in state government, for example, or being in a minority party situation, for two reasons. One, at this level, we don't really care about party designations. I know the party designations of all my peers, and I can tell you that we all work together very well, and what matters at the national level or the state level doesn't really matter to us at this level so much, so long as it doesn't have a direct impact on the city, because we do see the desperate need for particular items at this level, and we look past what might be party discipline or party dogma and look at what pragmatically needs to occur. And so with that, I think we're in a really strong position. And I think too, we all ran with our eye on basically the same items. Certainly there has been some disagreement on the path to an outcome for a particular topic or priority, but by and large, I think we've been really focused on the same end of the issue, if not the path to get to that end. And so, that's been gratifying. But of course, it is slow at times to do certain things. I know one of the things that I continue to talk about are minimum livability standards, for example, and also something that I've been working pretty hard on behind the scenes has been vacant or unused property registration, which is it exists in places like Salisbury. One program that I really like is in Tacoma Park, but getting that tailored to the local need and getting that to a point where it's a passable piece of legislation in some fashion, that is somewhat difficult. And I expect to be able to do something and get something introduced with both sooner than later, but it's just working through with the attorneys, talking about all the disparate outcomes that may occur, whether they're intended or unintended. And that's really key too, is anticipating unintended consequences, because it's easy to pass something with the best of intentions, but if the outcome is poor, then as a legislative body, we've done a poor job in not seeing all the outcomes that are possible. So I think without getting too much into individual items or individual topics or desires, I think, it's been essentially what I expected in my case, and I'm certain again that for others it may not be, but having had some background and seen the difficulty of either passing legislation or if not passing legislation, then working across what we'll call philosophical lines, that there's a knowledge that there's difficulty there.
We've interviewed 4 out of 5 so far, and I have to say that 2 of them mentioned specifically the issue of negativity. This was the unexpected thing that they had witnessed. And I guess I'm curious about if you saw that same disappointment.
I've not seen any real disappointment. I anticipate, there will be negativity both within the body at times when there's disagreement on a particular topic, but also out in the public, especially with regard to efforts or items. Then part of it's, I think, we as a body and we as a city are a comparatively small organization, and so I think we struggle at times with messaging or with ensuring that all the nuance of a topic is understood by those who have negativity. And look, I think this council and I have been significantly better than what we've seen in the past. And I use that term thoughtfully, better at messaging, because I think in the past we've seen the council come on Monday and then outside of perhaps an op-ed in the paper here or there, very little in the way of public messaging. And we've tried very hard to be very clear with the thought process and decisions that are made. But unfortunately, we do live in an area where the local press is not as robust as it was a decade or 2 decades ago, with cuts of the local newspapers, with a reduction in coverage from our local television. And so it's hard at times to get the word out about what something truly means. I've seen a lot of negativity, speaking of negativity, about the transition from the old Dorchester General Hospital site to the new freestanding medical facility. And a lot of what I see is what I think is maybe concern that is worthwhile or well-founded. But I've seen a lot of things that are just simply a lack of understanding and a lack of nuance or research into these things. And a lot of it, again, is because the ability to get this information out there in a sophisticated and a well thought out way has not been utilized, because it really, in a lot of ways, it doesn't exist. And, we've been talking about this freestanding medical facility, and the process has been going on for half a decade. And there were people that were surprised that the hospital on the riverfront was closing. And but again, some folks aren't taking the news or receiving it, and others, again, may be. But the level of ability that we have in this era from a legacy press standpoint to get the word out is I think less than what we'd like to see.
Dave was talking here about the number of interviews that we did with the other commissioners, and to a person, what struck me about this is how different this council is from past councils that I've seen in action. And particularly, you were talking about livability standards. That's a topic we heard nothing about in the past. And several of your commissioners mentioned best practices and looking elsewhere. You just mentioned a few items of that sort regarding livability standards. And that seems fairly remarkable to me here in Cambridge in my brief time here, to be hearing our council leaders saying, we're not all that unique. We have some unique problems, of course, but there's a lot of these problems that have been tackled elsewhere. And why don't we adopt some of those solutions? So do you find that that is indeed sort of common thinking across the whole council?
It really is. It's very common thinking across this council to try to look to other places that have faced similar problems and tweak or tailor the solution to Cambridge, but not to try to reinvent the solution. Because oftentimes what we see, places across Maryland, places across the Mid-Atlantic, places across the Eastern Shore have a lot of the same problems, and culturally aren't necessarily too distinct from us, but are distinct enough that we've got to make some adjustment. But by and large, most small, medium-sized municipalities, most places under 30,000 in a post-industrial Northeast are seeing similar issues. And Cambridge doesn't really, while we are unique in some ways, we don't really deviate from the mean or from the average with a lot of these things. And it really is just about adoption of what we've seen other places and researching what has been done other places. Because I think by and large, and look, this is, I think, coming from the fact that a lot of these folks have solid academic backgrounds, you're taught to just look for solutions rather than create solutions. Sometimes the solution's already there. And so we know that, and we can look at what has worked and we can adopt. And by and large, I think that's been something that past councils didn't do all that well. And part of that was, I think, a belief that this place was very specifically unique. And in some ways it truly is. But I think by and large, what we find is that when we look outside of our borders and we look to other places in the state, or as I say, in the region, there are a lot of places that have seen the same disinvestment industrial area, have seen high unemployment numbers, or have seen low educational attainment in aspects of the community, or have seen socioeconomic, just be honest about it, socioeconomic, I think, withdrawal within certain segments of the community that have been addressed. And so we don't need to try to go, well, this is something that's Cambridge's problem. This is a problem across the United States, and it's a problem no matter what it is, that has been addressed in one of 10,000 other communities, I'm sure.
The other thing that popped up, which surprised me a little bit, was the concern about the relationship with the county council. And at least one of the interviews spoke of the frustration that two members have been very supportive, and you're not getting much attention from the rest of the council. Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's an ongoing concern that the relationship with the county is not improved as much as we would like to have seen it improve. Look, the county has county-wide issues. We have city-specific issues, and the city, the issues we face are only a portion of the issues that are seen across the county. But there's a lot of relationship between the issues seen across the county and those seen within the city. And because the city is the population center of Dorchester County, and it is, I think, by and large, the economic center of the county. Certainly, there's business elsewhere in the county. Hurlock has a solid industrial base. There's agriculture and other concerns throughout the county, but by and large, commercial activity occurs in Cambridge, and by and large, your population is centered in Cambridge or the immediate surrounding area. And so it would be a hope that we would have a stronger exchange of ideas or discussions or of interaction, and we've not seen that yet, and it's something that we're continuing to work toward. One thing that I would like to see, and that I'm trying to establish, and we've not seen it happen yet. Sometimes we need to just pick up the phone and reach out with communications rather than get formalized letters about things. And that's a two-way street, and sometimes it's difficult to establish those connections. But over the course of the remainder of this year, which is fleeting very quickly, and 2022, I think that's something that we're going to try to work toward and get to a point where the relationship is much stronger, and we get to a point where there are joint meetings and a relationship there again.
I'd be remiss here as a stand-in for the journalism that used to be around if we didn't ask you again about the investigation. And in particular, I'm sure you're going to tell us it's a private matter, doesn't concern city business. We've heard that many times from you as well as fellow council members. But what do you know about the timeline? I mean, this has been dragging on since August.
Outside of, I think, a single phone call to my attorney, we've heard absolutely nothing. So in speaking to attorneys, it sounds like that may not be the worst thing in the world. And so, I've got nothing on timeline because we still know nothing on timeline. But it's just, it's certainly frustrating. But again, very, very little input or any direction, and no more information for you all, because unfortunately, really, I don't have any more information at this point.
Well, would you agree that it's frustrating to both the citizens as well as yourself for this thing to be dragging on this long with nothing further? Seems like the state police and whoever's running this investigation would have an obligation to be brisk about it.
I certainly can acknowledge that there's a level of frustration for folks, and I've had conversations out in the community, and I think people are supportive. They see the level of work and the effort that's being put in, but certainly personally frustrating at times as well.
We also allow everyone to kind of tell the community what's on your mind and what are the things that we should be interested in hearing about. I'm sure you have a pretty long list, but what are the things that you would like people to know about?
Well, there are, I think, 2 or 3 things that are particularly exciting. We'll start at the waterfront. While there's not an agreement in place between CWDI and the University of Maryland Medical System on any kind of transfer or exchange, to my knowledge at this point, I do understand that the negotiation on the consolidation of those properties is ongoing and is bearing fruit. And I think we'll see a circumstance sooner than later where this nonprofit that was formed by the city and the county with the guidance of the state is going to be able to then put out the RFP for development of this property. And it's going to be transformative, not just for Cambridge or Dorchester County, but really for the entire Eastern Shore. That property, to have that kind of pristine waterfront available for private use, public use, commercial use, event use. However it all bears out is going to be really exciting, and it's going to be very contributory to the success of Cambridge over the next century. And I think we're getting to a closer point with that. And the other exciting thing that we've been able to announce in the last week, been working with our planning director, Pat Escher, who was working very closely with some folks at DHCD to develop a program for home ownership and reinvestment in the Pine Street Historic District. And the governor was able to announce last week the creation of this program with $10 million. It's going to be split between the Pine Street Historic District here in the city of Cambridge and Johnston Square in Baltimore for reinvestment in these historic communities that have seen an abandonment of property and a flight away from them for quite some period. And that's really the culmination of discussions that go back to March and April. We had originally planned, I think, to fund it in one fashion, and DHCD, through the discussions that we were having with them, was able to go to the governor's office and say, hey, look, let's try a different avenue. And so this is actually part of the state's ARPA funds that they're going to be using here in the city of Cambridge. So supplementing the funds that we're receiving, which will total about $12.1 million. In addition to that, this additional money is coming from the state for investment in our community, in home ownership, and in rebuilding these areas that have seen such disinvestment for so long. And that's hugely exciting. And it's the culmination and fruition of an effort that I was part of, the commission president was part of, Commissioner Harrington was part of, Pat Escher, as I say, was part of, and all these meetings and discussions with DHCD, and they came to the forefront and they worked, and now we've got a program that's developing here that's going to be transformative for another part of the city. And so can't wait to see the direction that goes as well.
That is lightning fast, for something to happen when you compare it against CWDI. That Waterfront project has been in discussions for what, a quarter century, and still has a good ways to go. But in just 6 months or so, you've been able to do something really dramatic that's planned to be a pilot and a model for the whole state here in a rural area. So what other projects have you excited that might be coming up that you'll use some of this American Recovery monies for that are being looked at? I think that has not all been allocated or dedicated yet, right?
Outside of the funding for a tower for Rescue Fire Company, there's been none of those funds allocated. And where I personally wanted to slow down the process, because I think we were just throwing too many things at the wall and not being thoughtful enough, or again, thinking about intended consequences, but also unintended consequences of use, because this is a one-time trenching of funds that we're not going to see again. And it gives us an opportunity to get out of the hole in certain areas. And areas I've talked about are public safety and our wastewater, and also our sanitary water infrastructure. And so we definitely are still having these discussions. One thing that I want to do, and that I've been talking to our acting city manager, David Deutsch, about, is establishing a position that answers directly to the city manager. That's not just a grants administrator, but a grant writer as well, but it's a full-time position. And so that we can, one thing I fear that we will do if we act too quickly with these funds is we will utilize these funds for a project or a process that could have been funded in another fashion had we had the bandwidth within the organization to find that ability to fund. And so that's something that's important to me before we really start using these funds more broadly, is to ensure that we have explored other opportunities to fund things before we hit them with these funds, so that we can really extend them and stretch them as far as we can, and also expand our reach with regard to the funds that we're seeking and acquiring in other fashions. Especially with water infrastructure and clean drinking water and sanitary projects. There's a great deal out there, and I think that we've just not had organizationally the number of people in place or the ability to go out and seek those kinds of funds previously. And before we use these ARPA funds for that, I want to make sure that we've exhausted other means first.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much.
Dave, I appreciate it. Thank you as always.
And we'll see you next month.
Sounds good, sir.